Hello, my lovely library lions. Welcome back to another monthly wrap-up. Today I'm going to talk about everything I read in the month of May. I started May off with 5 Dark Fates by Kendare Blake. So this is the finale to the 3 Dark Crowns series. I did take a while to get to it, even though I had it on my TBR cart, because I was worried about how the series was going to end. And it didn't entirely alleviate my worries. I didn't really like the ending. I'm glad that at least some of the things I wanted to happen happened. It's hard to talk about without spoiling anything, but ultimately I'm glad that the sisters thing ended sort of the way I wanted, even if it wasn't exactly the way I wanted. But I hated Jules. I don't think she should have been a main part of this series. I don't think she should have had such a huge role. She was such a Mary Sue, and I hate saying that about female characters because female characters should be allowed to be powerful and chosen and wonderful, just like male characters get to be without any Mary Sue claims. But Jules came out of nowhere. She wasn't one of the protagonists, and then suddenly she was, and she was just perfect and powerful and amazing. She had no flaws, and I hated that. I hated how she ended up in the book. That's pretty much it. I didn't enjoy a lot of that because Jules was such a focus and such an important part of how the series ended. It also kind of felt like they just pulled things out of nowhere and prophecies so that the book could end however the author wanted it to. It felt really lazy, and I wasn't satisfied at the end of this. After that, I moved on to a contemporary thriller. So I read Suicide Notes from Beautiful Girls by Lynn Weingarten. This was weird. I liked the first part of it where she thinks something has happened to her friend and she's trying to solve it and figure out what exactly happened and why it happened. And things start to get less and less believable and more weird. There are some really good gripping scenes in here that are, again, hard to talk about without spoiling this book since it's a thriller. But there's a scene where where the main character is sort of involved in the murder of someone, and it's really gripping, but very unbelievable. I didn't believe that what was happening could realistically happen. And the ending was just left vague, and I kind of get what they were going for, but it just felt like it fell apart. It felt like it was going in one direction, and then it fell apart with very little foreshadowing to that was being how it was going to go. The main character's relationship with her friend, whenever we see it, seems very toxic and unhealthy, and I don't want to root for them to be together or for her to find out what happened to her. I kind of just want her to move on. And characters who seemed like fine, good people, other than 1 or 2 mistakes, have their lives ruined, and you're meant to feel happy about it. You're meant to be like, yes, they got their life ruined because one time they did a bad thing. And I agree, like, people who do bad things should face some sort of punishment for it, but maybe not with the severity that this book sort of drags them down. I thought it was all right. I enjoyed reading it. It was a quick read, but as far as believability went and how well the thriller was crafted to build up to an ultimate sort of climax, I don't feel like it delivered on that. I read an Owl Crate book pretty well every month, and this month was The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. This I loved so much. I liked the world that they built up. I liked how there were so many different kinds of female characters that got to have the spotlight and got to become friends. Not all of them were tough, not all of them were nice, but they worked together, and you got to see all these powerful, well-written characters come together in a group to fight for something that they believe in. And I like that almost all the characters who were important were women, and women of color a lot of the time. It was a really good, diverse read. I liked the setting that was inspired more by West African sort of mythos, because we don't get a lot of that in fantasy still. A lot of fantasy is still Eurocentric, so it was really nice to see that sort of inspiration. People are saying that this book is really dark and really graphic, and it is a little dark and graphic, but it isn't to the extent where I thought that I needed to be warned so much about it before going in. People were warning people about this, like this was going to be the most horrific young adult novel ever written in terms of describing brutality and horrible scenes, and it wasn't. It did a really good job describing horrible scenes and making you feel like you were there with the characters, but it wasn't as horrific as people were making it out to be, I felt. Especially when I've read young adult that has much worse, more graphically described scenes than this had. Still really loved it. I didn't like the romance. I often don't like romances in fantasy novels where they feel like just sort of a second glance, like, oh, we have to throw romance in here, so just whatever male characters nearby, make them fall in love. Very little chemistry, very few scenes together. I don't see why they had to include romance at all, but I really did enjoy this book, and I'm probably going to pick up the sequel when it comes out. This month I finished the Song of the Lioness read-along with Bookish Realms and Beautifully Bookish Bethany, and that concluded with Lioness Rampant by Tamora Pierce. I still think this is firmly a middle grade read. Maybe if you read it when you were younger, it holds on to some nostalgia and makes it a better read as an adult, but it wasn't bad. It was a good middle grade book. I really enjoyed it as a middle grade book, but I don't feel like it grew up with the readers. The characters certainly got older, but the writing doesn't, which is a problem because in this book, Alana is an adult, maybe 18, 19, maybe early 20s. The timeline isn't super clear. And she gets into a relationship with a man who is over 30. And he's written like he's over 30, but Alana's voice is still middle grade, so it is really gross. It's not a fun relationship to look at. It's not a fun relationship to examine. I just felt grossed out the whole time. It felt like he was taking advantage of her, even if he wasn't, because she's technically an adult and she's supposed to be able to make decisions for herself. But, you know, even if she's early 20s, some mid-40s or late 30s guy coming along and romancing her and calling her kitten is still a little gross. I do like, though, that Alana is allowed to explore multiple romantic options. I like that she has John and George, and she's never made out to be a bad person for sleeping with all of them and not deciding who she wants to settle down with. She says a lot of times she doesn't want to get married, and that's never looked down upon. Even if she ultimately decides to settle down, I like that it wasn't forced on her. I just thought including Liam in the pool of options was very weird because he was so much older, and it could have been done better with a younger character. Anyone else. The Ultimate Battle was really well written. I was super into it. I didn't like who they chose to be the villain, but I thought that the battle scenes were good, the death scenes were good. I just really wish more had been put into the characters. We get more characters introduced in this book, and there's more traveling time, and it feels like the characters from the first two parts of the series are forgotten about. We don't get any development for them. I think this could have been focused on a tighter cast. I don't see why they had to keep introducing new characters for Alana to interact with every book. I do like that she got female friends. I think that's great. I like that she has a female cast now, but ultimately it feels like people like Tom, who have a pretty important role in this book, are kind of forgotten development-wise because we didn't have time to spend with Tom over all these new characters Alana keeps encountering. I didn't love the series, really. I liked it. I thought it was a fun read. I think it's really great for middle grade. It's sex positive, which you don't see in middle grade a lot. You don't see women being allowed to take their sort of look at life and decide to be a warrior and decide that they're going to have different boyfriends and they're not going to settle down with their first love. So I think 14, 15-year-olds would get a lot out of this book. I think it's really good for them. But as an adult, going back, I don't know if it holds up. And I think maybe something similar but newer might be better. I feel awful saying that because it was fun to read. It was a fun book to read. I just didn't love it. I feel like there's so many things that could have been fine-tuned in here that just weren't. The next book I read was an ARC that I received from NetGalley, and that was You've Reached Sam by Daniel Tao. This was a really beautiful book as far as looking at grief is concerned. I really felt Jules and how she struggled to move on from her boyfriend, not just from his death, but even letting go of his things was difficult for her. She couldn't be good to her other friends. She sort of locked herself out of life, and I know a lot of people think that makes her unlikable, but it's also a very real reaction to the grief of losing your young boyfriend very tragically in a horrible accident. So she's not a good friend. She's not being a good person during this book, but it's because the grief is weighing on her so heavily, especially because they died when he was having a fight with her, and she feels it's sort of her fault. Other people are saying it's her fault. I really liked the connection between them, and then we got these little vignette stories of how they met and how they became boyfriend and girlfriend, how they fell in love. I thought those were so cute and fluffy. It really made me feel Sam's loss more when I knew what a good person and good boyfriend he had been throughout her life. My one complaint is that I didn't really like how the book tied up. It was too neat, and I think in a book that's dealing ultimately with grief and about moving on without forgetting everything, about going on with your life without entirely letting go, the ending was really neatly tied up in a way that you can't really reflect upon in real life. Like, in real life, you're not going to get these chances to say goodbye again to someone you've lost. You don't get magical phone calls to tie everything up and say everything that you wish you had said. So I thought that was a little... There's a point... I might not have caught on to this if there wasn't this point at the end of the book where you think it's going to end quite differently, and you're like, oh, that's a powerful, like, message about how we don't get to choose how we say goodbye, and it just happens. But then it's all kind of fixed and tied up so we can have the nice, happy ending with a little bow on it. Overall, I still think it's really good. As a debut novel, it's amazing. It had so many big feelings that made me have to put down the book just to sit with those feelings for a minute and think about life and grief and loss. And I think that's an amazing thing for a debut author to be able to do. Danielle Thau really dug deep into feelings and wrote really beautifully on the page Jules's grief and loss and her happiness. But the ending was just a little too neat for me, so it wasn't quite a 5-star read. I also read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik this month. I really enjoyed this book, but just to get it out of the way, I know there was a lot of drama about this paragraph that included dreadlocks and like a bug that crawls into them and sucks out magic. And after reading it, yeah, there's no reason that paragraph needs to be in there. It's thrown in when it could have just as easily been left out. It doesn't add anything to the story. There's no significance to it. It's just thrown in there. It's awkwardly written compared to the rest of the book, which I found was weird, but there's no reason for it to be in there. It's racist, and it doesn't need to be in the book. I don't know how editors missed it and why it was left in so long. It has been apologized for, and they've said they're removing it from future publications. So I don't want to discuss it more than that, but it definitely didn't need to be in here. And I don't know how so many readers who read this book before it got to the publication shelf didn't look at that and be like, maybe we shouldn't leave that part in there for publication. Otherwise, I really love the world that Novik built in this book. I really like the characters that she's building up. I think Orion is so cute. He's dumb, but he's a sort of chosen one hero who's very simple. Elle is unlikable, but I like her. She's a nasty protagonist. She's not nice to people. She's isolated herself essentially by being horrible to those people who haven't already isolated her because her powers feel a little weird. But I still liked her, and I liked the way she interacted with Orion. I thought that was a really cute relationship. I loved the friendships that she built in this book, and that she has her little trio of girlfriends now that are all working together to graduate through this dangerous school together. I really liked the school. It was really fun how many sort of random aspects there were to it, how like even the vending machines, you put in a token and you don't know what you're going to get. I thought it was really neat. I liked all the little details that gave the school life and made it as much of a character as any of the other characters in the book. I'm really excited to read the sequel because I think it's going to be really good, and I'm glad that this is going to be sort of I think it's on mark to be sort of a longer series, so I'm excited to keep going with this. And I don't know if the comparisons to Harry Potter are valid. I don't know if we needed those comparisons. It takes place in a magic school, so Harry Potter, I don't know if we needed that, but it's a really good read on its own. I knew it was going to be good because Naomi Novik is a great author. So I'm happy to continue with this, and I'm glad that she's apologized for the unfortunate misstep that she made that I'm not sure how got this far anyways. The last book I read this month was my monthly manga, and it's the 28th volume of My Hero by Kohei Horikoshi. This cover, first of all, is stunning. It has two of my husbands. I adore it. It's beautiful. Unfortunately, this is sort of in the middle of a battle, so it's not really a great volume in my opinion. I don't like the battle volumes. I feel like the battles are messy. It's hard to tell what's going on, and there's just not a lot happening ultimately. There's no character growth. It's just a really long, drawn-out battle. Especially because the war arc has gone on so long, it's really boring at this point. I can see why people have dropped it. During this arc, there's nothing happening that is... I suppose significant things are happening, but it doesn't feel significant anymore because it's been drawn out so far. We do get to see more of Aizawa. It's sort of using his powers, which is nice. I like the focus on him. I like seeing more Shigaraki, but It's just boring. This arc needs to end, and it's just ended in Japan at the time that this is coming out in America, so it still has a long way to go. I don't know why they dragged this out so long. It's really unfortunate because the series was so good before then. So those are all the books that I read in May. I got to a total of 7 books, which is not my best, but it's not my worst, so I'm hoping I'll keep the stride going. I'm going to have my summer TBR posted next week, so you'll see what I'll be reading this month and the coming months. I'm really excited to do that. And otherwise, I hope that you have a lovely weekend. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.